Hey, folks, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast live on a Monday night. Uh, Not always planning on going live on a Monday night, but here we are. I'm, man, just exhausted. I had a great weekend. I've had multiple great weekends in a row in Tacoma. And then, do you guys get the? I'm embarrassed to admit I'm 39 years old and I still get the Sunday scaries. Do you guys get that? Where you're like, I just can't get to sleep on a Sunday night. Couple things we'll talk about very quickly before we get into the meat of the episode. Shane Gillis hosted the ESPYs. Um, one of the funniest hosts of an award show ever. And I'm not kissing his ass. Like I do think he's one of the most talented comedians of our time. Also, by the way, the people who were offended, I saw some people were offended by some of his jokes. Those articles could have been written before the ESPYs. Like, those people were going to be mad no matter what. This is like the White House Correspondents' Dinner of sports, where, like, these professional athletes are going to take some shit. And Shane Gillis, I thought, did a great job. There was some conversation about how, like, he was bombing in the room. And I do think it's possible. There were some of the jokes that like killed in the room, and you could see guys that were like comedy adjacent, Pat McAfee, Drewski, guys like that were like really loving it. That's a tough audience though. That's not a fun group. By the way, I did some comedy this weekend, and it's a different way to not have a fun group. I've done some shows that are like, I did a show at a country club, a private country club in Richland, Washington. And that was like, I wouldn't call it like the Illuminati. The SB's attendees are like the Illuminati of sports. Maybe not quite. It's the players, not the owners largely. But I've done some shows with like really rich people in social settings where they may lose some face if they, if they are seen laughing at an offensive joke. And these are not fun audiences. The crowd at home, I think liked it. All the reviews I've seen from people who like comedy seem to like Shane Gillis quite a bit. Seem to have liked his performance quite a bit. There was even like bizarre, funny nods to the people that listen to his podcast. And then the amazing joke is the one where Matt McCusker's wife is sitting in the audience next to him, and he says, "We have four-time All-Star Brittany Hicks here," and it's Matt McCusker, his podcast co-host's wife. Not a WNBA player. Very, very funny. By the way, this is at a time when the WNBA could not be, is doing better than it's ever done. It's more popular than it's ever been. Take the joke. This is you being treated equally. This is you being not condescended to or patronized. Like, this is good for the sport. In the same way, by the way, that I say, like, Caitlin Clark is great for the WNBA. That's not controversial, but I also think Angel Reese is great for the WNBA. You have to have a villain also. You can't just have Superman. You have to have a villain. And she's doing great. She's playing the heel great. These are like, if I was going to pick my two favorite WNBA players, I know it's out of ignorance to a degree, but it's Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. It's an exciting matchup every time. Take the hit. Get treated like a mainstream sport. Welcome to it. It's great. It's great news for the WNBA that people are making jokes about it that are not just nobody watches it and it loses money. I guess that joke was kind of that nobody watches it, but I wanted to do a podcast talking about the Mariners first half, to do some grades of the Mariners the first half. I wanted to do it over the weekend. I wanted to release it over the All-Star break. I went out on Thursday. I golfed on Tuesday, and I think that was the day. And I wanted to do it that day. I got fucking heat stroke on the golf course. I've never had that before. I walked the golf course and I played 16 holes, but after I birdied 14 and felt pretty bad, and then I played 15, and I was like to my buddy I was playing with, a friend of the podcast, Corey Michaelis. I was like, hey man, I think I might want to can we just let the group behind us just play through? And I played 16, and luckily at Allamore Golf Course, 16 is very close to where my car was, and I was like, I'm just calling it. That's it. I'm done, and I quit for the day. So I did not record the day that I planned on, and so we're going to talk about the Mariners. We're doing grades. The second half has started. None of that is factored into any of these grades, but we're going to talk about them anyway. Also, they beat the Astros in a series. That's a great way to start the second half. Sweeping them would have been better, obviously, but to beat them, that's big. Lose to Milwaukee tonight, not great. But first, I want to talk about the crown jewel of this Mariners franchise is their ability to develop starting pitching. And last year, I had to hear all year about how this was a historically good rotation. It's the best rotation in the history of baseball, whatever. That was not true. It was a very good rotation. It was easily a top 10 rotation in baseball. And they were historically healthy. They were healthier than, they were in probably the top 1% of healthiest rotations in the history of the sport. But by productivity, by advanced metrics, by things that take away the factors, take away the impact of T-Mobile Park, they were very good. They were not historically amazing. And this year, we've kind of seen them regress to mean. And of course, it's easy to point at the injuries. There's been injuries. 3 of the 5 guys have spent time on the IL, right? Everybody but Luis Castillo and Brian Wu have spent time on the IL. It's not exactly surprising that there's been a drop-off considering the injuries, but if you're talking about overall performance, they have not been particularly great. By XFIP minus, XFIP minus is kind of the pitching equivalent of WRC plus. There certainly are better stats on like StatCast, but we're going to use XFIP minus as a decent approximation of pitching performance. The Mariners' starting pitchers are 13th best in baseball. That's a big drop-off. That is a big drop-off from last year. But by the way, by wins above replacement, they are, it's significantly worse than that. By wins above replacement, they are, why can't I find them on here? 19th. Part of that's probably because they pull their pitcher so quickly, which is, by the way, I'm sure a practice. I was talking the other week about how my Uncle Bob, I might have tweeted this, I might have talked about it on the podcast. I had this moment thinking about my Uncle Bob, who was very tolerant, open-minded guy until it came to baseball, and he thought Eric Chavez was too flashy. Like he did not like flashy baseball players. He would have hated Randy Arozarena. He would have absolutely hated Randy Arozarena. He also would have hated and was starting to hate already. He passed away a couple years ago. I think I've talked about him on the podcast, but if not, that's the reason I was thinking about him as opposed to texting him or talking to him. He absolutely would have hated these guys coming out after 85, 90 pitches. So the Mariners probably accrue less wins above replacement for their starting pitchers because they pitch less innings. By wins above replacement, they are the 19th best pitching staff in baseball. By XFIP minus, they are the 13th best. This is a pretty large departure from where they were last year. This is the crown jewel of the franchise. This is the hallmark of this team. And we're going to talk about the starting pitchers, the hitters, the relief pitchers, the defense, and the coaching staff / general managers as we go down this. But for starting pitchers, because they've gone from being a very good top 5, arguably top 5 pitching staff to a middle of the road, I gave the Mariners a C-. Now, I do have some concerns that there are long-term worries if you hold on to Luis Castillo early in the season. I'm actually pulling it up right now because early in the season he was showing some kind of hallmark velocity loss. Actually, he's gotten some velocity back. He was down over a mile per hour early in the year, and he's now down just about half a mile an hour, which is significantly less concerning. He's also pitched pretty well considering the drop in velocity. And like I said last week, I do think he's probably maintained some of his trade value. Also, please feel free. I'm giving him a C minus. Please feel free in the comments or in the chat to tell me whether you disagree, if I'm too high or too low, because I am. Yeah, I would love to. I would love to argue. It's more fun when people are chatting. I certainly think if we're approaching the trade deadline, I'm going to talk about trades a lot, potential trades. If the Mariners make a trade, we're going to talk about that trade ad nauseum, I'm sure. I'm not advocating for the Mariners to trade for a starting pitcher or to invest in a starting pitcher for this year, but on performance alone, the pitching staff has not been great this year. It's been mediocre. It's been middle of the pack. Sure, there's some numbers if you want to use traditional stuff like ERA where they might look a little bit better, but the starting staff has not been dominant. I would argue it was not incredibly dominant. It wasn't historically dominant last year. I've always said of this Mariners team, they have like 5 number 2 or 3 starters. And I think you can do pretty well. I think you can make a run in the playoffs with that. I don't think you necessarily need a bona fide ace, but the media and kind of teal-colored glasses have allowed us to think that this Mariners team actually has 5 aces, and I certainly don't think that's true. All right, next, let's talk about the offense. So, very obviously, Cal Raleigh has been the story of 2025. It goes into the All-Star break, leading the league in home runs. I want to say during the home run derby, Mike Petriello said that it was like all of his hits from June 29th until the home run derby were home runs. This is all, by the way, while playing very good defense. Raleigh has a reputation for being a very good defender. Great pitch framer, Platinum Glove award winner, and also a 171 WRC plus, already worth 6 wins above replacement this year, and signed a team-friendly extension in the offseason. Absolutely amazing. No complaints, very obviously, about Cal Raleigh. I do think there are some misconceptions. So there's a couple things happen to start the year. Obviously, the Mariners lose Victor Robles, who they probably expected to be a pretty good, we're going to talk about defense later, expected to be a pretty good defensive outfielder and a decent offensive outfielder, something like a league average hitter in the outfield. And they lose Robles for, I don't think it's been called the year yet, but that's in the realm of possibility. It could be the year. We may not see Victor Robles this year. They lose Ryan Bliss right away also. They lose Luke Raley for an extended amount of time. And the plan was, I think, to have Robles, Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez, and Luke Raley split those outfield reps, give Raley time at first base, and then immediately that falls apart. Donovan Solano, one of their 2 major signings in the offseason. I think that's right. Donovan Solano was terrible for the beginning of the year, has had stretches of brilliance since then. Jorge Polanco starts the year super hot, can't play the field, but starts the year super hot, one of the league's best hitters in April, and then in recent weeks has kind of started to pull the nose up, but was like absolutely tail spinning. So this offense has not gotten contributions from all of the guys it expected to get contributions from. A lot of people also expected a huge step forward for Julio Rodriguez, a full offseason under Edgar Martinez, this change in the coaching staff, and we got fooled by the second half heroics and how great he was in August and September last year. That stuff might be coming around the corner again. Did not carry over into the beginning of this year. I still think Julio Rodriguez is a very good player. I think he's absolutely worth the contract he received. I'm not mad. I don't hate Julio Rodriguez. There's no part of me that has. I'm happy that he's a Mariner, and I want him to stay a Mariner. I think he's very much worth his contract, but the offense has not taken the step forward that I think people would have wanted. And so where the Mariners have gotten contributions are J.P. Crawford. So Polanco, by the way, when Polanco got traded for last season, there was excitement because the Mariners had kind of been in on Polanco for a while. A guy who'd been pretty good anytime he was healthy and who had been healthy for most of his career. He had one injury that led to missing time in 2 seasons, but a guy who'd been pretty healthy for most of his career. And then he spends most of last year injured and ineffective and ends up a free agent. And when the Mariners brought him back at what seemed like kind of an overpay, there was not excitement about Jorge Polanco. And then he ended up, he's put together, on the whole, it's been a pretty good season. I think if you take away April, it looks a lot worse, but on the whole, it's been a pretty good season. J.P. Crawford had a huge bounce back season. 131 WRC plus to this point, and that is including the last 4 games or last 3 games. I don't think that Fangraphs has tonight's game in yet, but 388 on base percentage is the exact perfect guy. He's a great bat for shortstop. Now we're going to talk about JP in a little bit because I think there's got to be some concern about JP Crawford's long-term value, maybe even near-term value, but offensively, you're thrilled with what you're getting from JP Crawford this year. And then obviously, 2 guys, Dominic Canzone and Randy Arozarena. Canzone has been tremendous. And whether he can sustain it or not, I don't think he can sustain a 157 WRC plus, but if he can play the rest of the year at 120, and I'm kind of like, I'm stuck in between 2 thoughts with Dominic Canzone because I don't think he's a good defender, but I do know in Tacoma he was even playing center field. So I wonder if there's some potential to not be a complete waste in the outfield for Dominic Canzone. I don't think he's shown it this year. And if you look at like StatCast sprint speed or whatever, there may just be physical limitations to his defense. But I do think that he's not a complete zero in the outfield, but not a good defensive outfielder, which is going to become a theme of what we talk about as this podcast goes on. And then Randy Arozarena has just been, especially in the week leading up to the All-Star break, or the 10 days or whatever leading up to the All-Star break, was just absolutely mashing. Went from a guy who was like probably not even in consideration for an All-Star spot to being the guy that replaced Julio Rodriguez when he dropped out of the All-Star game. Like, that's pretty amazing. Again, Arozarena, not a great outfielder, very good hitter. At a point earlier in the season, I was pissed that Jorge Polanco, who played second base last year and was slotted to play third base this year, was taking up this DH spot that really should have belonged to Randy Arozarena. And in a perfect world, I think you'd have Luke Raley in one corner outfield spot, Victor Robles in another corner outfield spot, and Arozarena would not step into that outfield. I think that's the most ideal outcome for the Mariners. But right now, they don't have that luxury because they don't really have a very good first baseman. So Luke Raley's probably the best bat they have there. They don't really have a very good corner outfielder to replace Randy Arozarena defensively. And there's just not a ton of organizational depth because they've faced injuries. And all of that factored in, by the way, it sounds like I'm presenting a doom and gloom scenario. The Mariners have this is embarrassing. I had it up and now I'm like fighting to find it. They had the 5th highest WRC plus and the 6th highest wins above replacement. So they've played fewer games than a couple teams, so that they've played fewer games than the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks, which I think is probably the difference. And I guess it's batters WRC plus, and we're gonna get into what's dragging down hitter value or defensive player value for the Mariners in a moment, which might be playing my hand a little. So 5th best WRC plus after making like a glaringly small amount of impact moves this offseason. I think for me, compared to expectations going into this season, I'm giving the Mariners offense an A-. Now, I think that it's easy to look at the Mariners and go, oh, this is a team that's, the OPS is this, and the batting average is this, and the slugging percentage is this, and to completely ignore the park factors. WRC plus, wins above replacement, they consider the park factors fifth best offensive team in baseball by WRC plus. If you say you expected the Mariners to be there, you're lying. Now, would this team be? I'd love to see what you could do if you could omit everyone, or if you could omit Cal Raleigh and put a replacement level catcher in that spot, because we might be down to a B-. We might be down to a C+ in that case. The rest of the Mariners offense, outside of Cal Raleigh, has kind of been inside of the error bars you might expect. I liked Dominic Canzone. I certainly don't think he's going to be a 150 plus WRC plus guy, but I've always thought he was a guy that might hit in the big leagues. Randy Arozarena, same thing. A guy that you thought might be able to continue to scrap together seasons that are pretty good. Nobody had a 171 WRC plus coming out of Cal Raleigh, and nobody had a 150 plus coming out of Dominic Canzone. But the other guys are kind of all in the range of where you might they're in the maybe 95th percentile of what is a realistic possibility. So I'm A-. Better than you expected. We're going to talk about how the front office didn't have a bunch of offensive talent in the offseason, so this is not to absolve them of that. The Mariners have had a good offense in spite of an incompetent. I certainly don't think that Jerry DiPoto is cheap, but maybe a cheap ownership group or whatever. We'll get there. All right, let's talk about the bullpen, because the bullpen's interesting because the Mariners have had a very stars and scrubs bullpen the last several years. In ways, it's been a strength. The back end of the bullpen has been a strength, and then depth in the bullpen has been a problem. In fact, I want to look at the box score today because I saw they called up they called up Brandon Garcia today. Did he pitch in today's game? Let's see. I was prepping for this here podcast. He did get in and gave up 4 hits in 1 inning. Okay. Perfect. I'm not super stressed about that. No strikeouts. Give the guy, give him some grace for being his major league debut, but the Mariners don't have a ton of depth in their bullpen, and you'd like to see them have at least another impact arm, I would say. And Matt Brash has been fine. I'm always hesitant when I talk about I'm like, which Spire is on this team? Is it Justin Spire? I think it's Justin Spire. Gabe Spire. God damn it. I even saw the promo about how his cousin, I think it's his cousin, Justin Spire. There's been Spires in the big leagues for 7 decades, 12 decades. Abner Doubleday, his best friend was a Spire. I would say this is a weakness for the Mariners, and it's a weakness that I think if you're a team that's not going to invest in your offense, you're going to be playing a lot of close games. Investing in your bullpen is pretty valuable, and the Mariners did not do that either. The reality is, and we're going to get to it, the Mariners have not invested deeply in the team at all, this offseason. So here, let's just go to wins above replacement. Andres Munoz has continued to be very good. Pitches in his first All-Star game. Is selected to his second All-Star game, but pitches in his first All-Star game. Gabe Spire, 0.8 wins above replacement. Matt Brash, 0.4 wins above replacement. I know he had the long stretch of not giving up a run. I know he has a 1.14 ERA. He's got tremendous batted ball luck. His home run to fly ball ratio is below average. There's gonna be some. This is not to discount. This is not to, that Matt Brash isn't good, but Matt Brash is not like a stalwart setup man at this point. He's fine. He's good. Do you want to be in your third best arm? Probably. In your bullpen? Probably not. Some of the guys that the Mariners probably look to rely on, Gregory Santos has been somewhat disappointing. Carlos Vargas, despite having a sub-4 ERA, which is actually not that tremendous for a reliever, but also, I mean, the peripherals are in rough shape. Lots of walks, not that many strikeouts, decent ground ball rate, but like even the there's not a lot of promise in the underlying numbers apart from the fact that he throws 98, 99 miles an hour. So the Mariners bullpen, what were the expectations versus what is the performance? Give him a D plus. Now, I think that's actually I might walk that back slightly. I'm gonna own it. I don't think the expectation should have been super high based on the personnel, but they were. You thought that having Santos available would be meaningful. Having Brash available would be meaningful. Brash has been very good. Santos has not been very good. Beyond that, I mean, it's just, there's been a lot of Eduard Bazardo has been decent, but again, the peripherals are a mess on a lot of these guys, and you just cannot overstate, or maybe you can overstate the impact of T-Mobile Park. I don't think anyone's overstating the impact of T-Mobile Park. These guys are going to have better traditional numbers than you might expect based on their actual performance because they pitch in the most friendly pitcher's park in baseball. They're fielding adjusted stats. They're fielding independent pitching. Their batted ball data does not look good. If I were the Mariners, I think the Mariners... It's funny to say they have an A- on offense and also say that they need to make a move on offense. And I do think that they do. I do think that the Mariners need to make an addition to their lineup. And I think it's possible that the upgrade that they make won't necessarily be a massive upgrade that upgrades the offense a ton, but rather someone who is a moderate upgrade but can play a defensive position competently. There's a lot of talk about replacing Ben Williamson, about trading for a third baseman to take over for Ben Williamson. Well, Williamson is not his. I believe Williamson is. Let's take a look at his. Let's take a look here. Yeah, Williamson has been a good defender. His reputation in the minors was that he was a very good defender. He's been a better than average defensive third baseman. So there is defensive value you'd be losing if you just replace Ben Williamson with someone who hits better. And also, by the way, Ben Williamson, not a very good hitter, 75 WRC plus. I acknowledge that. But you can't just go replace him with a slug that hits a little bit better. You got to find someone who can do a little bit of both. Now, is that guy Eugenio Suarez? We'll talk about it. We're not getting into that right now, but and we're going to get into the defense. Let's get into the defense. So, the Mariners for years have been reputed as this just run prevention, pitching and defense. That's what's going to take them to the promised land. That's where the hope lies, is in pitching and defense. And for years, that's been true. They've been pretty decent in the field for years. Let's see where they were at last year. I want to see actually. Let's go to 2024 and see where they ranked. So I'm going to spoil this briefly. Fangraphs defensive value, the Mariners are 8th worst, also known as 23rd best. StatCast's fielding run value, they're actually 24th. They're a slot worse. This is a bad defense. It's a bottom third defense. Now, as I've said, you got Luke Raley playing out of position, I would argue. Is that going to change? You have the guy that's backing him up, or that has been backing him up. Rowdy Tellez was a DH only. Donovan Solano is a 5'9" like second base, third base guy for most of his career. I'm sure he's a competent first baseman. In fact, I'm sure we can find this relatively quickly. Let's see. Solano, where are you at? If he's on the second page, that's bad. Solano. No, I did not spell that correctly. Yeah, so Donovan Solano has played 61 games and is the 39th best defender. I do think that includes some pitchers, but it includes pitchers, but has been a very bad defensive player in that period of time. J.P. Crawford, by the way, sneakily becoming a very bad defensive shortstop. And the Mariners have him under contract for one more year. I have an idea about a J.P. Crawford-centric podcast episode for the offseason because I like J.P. Crawford. I liked him as a draft pick. I wanted the Mariners to draft him. I was thrilled when they traded for him. I don't think he's a shortstop anymore. He's going to play shortstop for the Mariners the rest of the year. I don't think he's a shortstop anymore. And the numbers back that up. They don't look great for J.P. Crawford, but the bat's very good. So, I mean, obviously I think you let him play the rest of the season at shortstop because I don't think there's a viable option behind him. And I don't think making J.P. Crawford your full-time DH is what I'm asking for. I don't think he's that bad at shortstop that you're better off having him DH. But I do think he's not a shortstop anymore. And I guess the other thing is, I don't know if Cole Young or Colt Emerson, even if you're just talking about defense, would actually be better than him in 2025 anyway. So I don't know that that's a spot that I'd be looking to upgrade. Jorge Polanco has been horrific. Rowdy Tellez was really bad. Randy Arozarena has been very bad. Leody Tavares was very bad. Victor Robles in 10 games was very bad. Dominic Canzone is not good. Mitch Garver, bad. Dylan Moore has been bad defensively this year. Let's take a dive into Dylan Moore a little bit more because I am a little bit curious where run value. Can we sort this table by year? This would be a little more instructive. I guess not. So he's been worth -2 runs at third base where he's played 80 innings. That's bad. Left field, 137 innings, -1 runs. Right field, 109 innings, -1 runs. Shortstop, only 26 innings, 0 runs. It's actually better than J.P. Crawford. Second base, 175 innings, been worth a run. Dylan Moore has not been good defensively. He still has the versatility, but he has not been good defensively. This is a bad defensive Mariners team, like a legitimately bottom third defensive team. The thing about that's promising is defense is cheap to trade for, but like how many spots do you have guys that you can afford to lose their bat? Especially if Victor Robles doesn't come back. Especially Ryan Bliss, I think, is out for the year. Ryan Bliss, there's a very good chance if Ryan Bliss stays healthy, he's not on this 25-man roster right now. So I don't want to overstate I like Ryan Bliss as a prospect. I thought he was an interesting prospect to bring in. He's not the difference between the Mariners making and not making the playoffs by any means. So the Mariners defense, one thing I want to say before we get out of this, before we move on from the defense, is that Julio Rodriguez has been tremendous. And I think we've somehow reached a point because of his offensive struggles that we underappreciate Julio's defense. Julio's been great, and he's been great defensively his whole career. And it is very common for guys, especially guys who are these like 5-tool hyper athletes as they get bigger and stronger. A lot of times that leads to them hitting better, but they also lose defensive range and they stop being able to play center field. One of the unique things about Mike Trout, no, I am not comparing Julio Rodriguez to Mike Trout. I'm not saying he's Mike Trout, but one of the things about him is he's stuck in center field as a competent center fielder for a very long time. Longer than anyone would have expected, and including as his body started to look like a guy who probably shouldn't be able to play center field anymore. Julio is a great defender by every metric. Cal Raleigh is a great defender. Ben Williamson is a good defender. Beyond that, the Mariners are essentially at every position after that they are below average. I never did quite get to the 2024 Mariners. Yeah, Josh Rojas was worth 8.7 runs above average. J.P. Crawford was good defensively last year. What's different? Is that right? Damn. So J.P. Crawford was worth 4.7 wins above average at shortstop last year, that's great. 90 WRC plus and 4.7 runs above average defensively for 1.6 wins above replacement. This year, the inverse, great hitting. The defense has been bad. He's a new dad. I'll give him some leeway. I want him on the roster next year. I'm not saying trade him. I have some creative thoughts. We'll talk about him in the offseason. I gave the Mariners defense a D-. I think that the Jerry Dipoto is supposed to be an analytics guy. This might be me blaming the front office, which we're going to get to. I might be double dipping on blaming the front office, but as constructed, I think this team should be better defensively. And they haven't been. They've been very bad. Bottom third of the league. Let's see what they were in. Let's see if I can get to this quickly. The 2024 Mariners were... Why am I not seeing them? They were 18th defensively, so middle of the pack. And then 2023, they were 7th in StatCast fielding run value. So, I think they can make improvements there. You don't want to do it at the expense of the offense. And let's get to the final. My final grades are for the front office, who I'm kind of torn because I do like the approach of, if Jerry Dipoto had said from the beginning that he wanted to build from the farm system and he wasn't going to be trading away prospects for guys, and he hadn't gone down that road ever, I think I would have given him more leeway. But we're like in the third act of Dipoto now. The initial, I'm the big analytics guy making these kind of margin of the roster moves that are supposed to be big, to a guy that is going out and making big trades, trading for Luis Castillo, to we're kind of back to this, we're going to build from within, build the core from within. And I actually think that to build a sustainable team in Seattle, there's just no way in the next 5 years they're going to be able to build an offense that is sustainably good enough to convince agents and free agents that Seattle is an offensive neutral place to play. And so I said it on, I put a clip out, I've said it on past episodes that I don't think the Mariners should trade hitters. And the reason is because the only way they There we go. I'm back on the screen for now, at least. Um, so the front office, the coaching staff, we all we heard in the offseason was a full offseason of Dan Wilson, a full offseason of Edgar Martinez, this coaching staff. They're going to these hitters are going to develop under them, and Julio hasn't, is Dominic Canzone a product of the coaching staff? Dominic Canzone is certainly a product of the front office. And Josh Rojas, who I said before, was a product of the front office. He didn't stick around. I don't think that Rojas is super productive elsewhere this year. Let's pull up Josh Rojas. Rojas is in Chicago with the White Sox. Just bad on all sides. Negative defensive value, 36 WRC plus. There was a lot of alarm bells going off when the Mariners non-tendered him in the offseason, and does not look like a bad move. So I was as frustrated as anyone the Mariners didn't make a move in the offseason. I think the thing that I've realized at the very minimum is that batters don't want to take the Mariners' money. And I think it's important that, maybe that's Jerry DiPoto's fault for some reason. Certainly falls on the organization. I think that if some improvements were made, if the hitter's eye was fixed, if the Mariners were making an effort to make the stadium neutral for batters, maybe it'd be a little more attractive. But right now, I just don't think that there is if you're not signing a player to a contract that is arguably the final contract he'll sign in his career, that dude shouldn't want to sign in Seattle. It would be malpractice from his agent to sign a short-term show-me deal in Seattle. His agent should be fired. He should be if that guy plans on signing another contract, he should be signing minor league roster invites before signing a small 1-year prove-it deal in Seattle that's guaranteed. And that's what we've seen. It's been very hard for the Mariners to acquire offensive talent in the offseason. And the way that they've been most effective at doing it is through trades and through prospect development. And I think that's I will say that, as the farm system is refilled and these guys are approaching the big leagues and some of them are making the big leagues, I do think that's a strength of the Mariners. I don't know. I'm having a hard time reconciling it because my internal philosophy has changed a little bit as it's become more obvious how hard it is to acquire offensive players, but also how much leash do you give Jerry DiPoto? That being said, this might be my least popular grade. I give the front office a C+. I know there's people out there that would give them an F. There's people out there that would give... I guess it's like coaching, ownership, and front office. Ownership, if you were going to break those out, I think coaching is like a C+. Maybe coaching is a B+. I don't think Dan Wilson has done anything that's been incredibly frustrating or glaringly bad. I don't blame Dan Wilson for any of the Mariners' struggles, really. And I also think maybe the expectations were a little bit unrealistic that the offense was going to just flip into an entirely different offense in the offseason and that Julio Rodriguez would become the superstar we've all expected. And then I guess I'd probably put the GM at a C+, the talent acquisition team, whoever, however you want to define that. It's no longer in baseball as in a single role, but I'll give them a C+. And then overall, I'd say I'm giving the Mariners a B-. I didn't think the Mariners were going to be, I thought they'd be scuffling around 500. It's kind of where they are. But they've done it despite significant injury bad luck. Now, some of that stuff you could plan for, you can have extra depth, but to lose Luke Raley, Victor Robles, Ryan Bliss, to have Jorge Polanco limited to one side of the bat or one side of the plate and not playing the field, to have all 3 of your 5 starters spend time on the IL, and to still be a likely playoff team as we sit right now, and I think this is not going to include tonight's loss. The Mariners have a 72.4% chance of making the playoffs. I believe they had at points last year a 90+% chance of making the playoffs. So if you interpret probability like many people do, which is anything over 50 equals 100 in your mind, divorce yourself from that. Last year they were, in a very good position and ended up losing it. This year they're at 72%, which means almost 3 out of 10 times they would not make the playoffs if we could somehow simulate life, 100 times. But it's a better position than I thought they'd be in. There's been frustrating stretches. There's been maybe some strategic blunders. There's been, but yeah, I think like overall, slightly better than I expected, especially considering all the injuries and all that. So those are the great. I don't know. This is like rudimentary bullshit segment on a podcast, but I like putting stuff on record. That's one of the things I miss the most about having a blog, is being able to just look back and go, what was my opinion of this 4 years ago when it happened? Because sometimes, by the way, it was horrifically bad. I thought that when the Mariners, they traded Michael Saunders for J.A. Happ, and then signed, or did they sign or trade for Nelson Cruz initially? I think they signed him. A guy, by the way, towards the end of his career, signed a deal that could have been his last contract, is my recollection. I wrote that Nelson Cruz and Michael Saunders were equals, and that the Mariners spent $40 million or whatever amount of $1 million. I don't know if I did the annual value or whatever, but this amount of millions of dollars to be the same team they were, because J.A. Happ, I thought J.A. Happ was better than I expected and stuck around in the big leagues for a couple of years. And Nelson Cruz was like one of the best hitters in baseball over the stretch that he was with the Mariners and then beyond. And I was incredibly wrong on that. But there's things I've been right on. I don't have any, my failures hurt more than I hate to lose more than I love to win, I guess. I don't remember the major successes as much. I was thrilled about John Jaso. He was great in Seattle. I always thought Brad Miller deserved more of a chance, and he wasn't great in Seattle. So, but here we are on record, B- first half of the season grade. And now let's talk about the Seahawks cut Noah Fant. When a team makes a deal like this, I think it really reminds me, as I read the comments, read the tweets, read the reaction, listen to the reaction, how little people understand the way NFL front offices work, the way salary cap management works, the way contracts in the NFL work, the way talent acquisition in the NFL works. Noah Fant has been, it feels like he's still got untapped upside, untapped potential. His combine numbers were like Vernon Davis-esque. I think the best athlete in his tight end class coming out of the draft. And I was thrilled when he was included in the trade for Russell Wilson. I thought he was great. I thought he was a guy that was a first-round talent that they were getting along with first-round picks. And Drew Lock. And what was the other guy? Shelby Harris. Is that the extent of it? Was that the full trade? Was it Drew Lock? No, it was like 2 first-round picks, some later-round picks maybe. Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant. Russell Wilson trade. Just for my own... Damn. It was 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris. And I'm sure there might have been an offsetting pick from the... What a trade. Noah Fant hasn't produced. And he's expensive. The Seahawks signed him to a deal last year that I thought was a little bit of an overpay. But if they saw something in him that they liked, I was on board with it. But he didn't produce. He's never produced. He's never been great. He actually had a stretch last year where he was like one of the best tight ends in football statistically. But let's see, Noah Fant. So, yeah, what did he have? Last year he had 64 targets, 48 receptions, 500 yards, but in only 9 games started, 14 games played. Let's see. I want to look at there was a stretch where he really performed. Yeah, I think it was like between I don't know where the stretch would have been. I think I'm completely wrong. I think he had so weeks 6 and 7 he had 6 targets, 4 targets, 63 and 65 yards. Scored 1 touchdown in week 18 last year. Just didn't get it done. Has not gotten it done. It's not a controversy to get rid of a guy who's not getting it done. If the Seahawks had not made big moves at tight end, it would make sense. I've been saying it all offseason that I thought he was a likely cap casualty. And so I'll see comments that are like, can the Seahawks really afford to give up a good player? And it's like, one, they drafted Elijah Arroyo. They have A.J. Barner. The tight end position is going to look different in this offense than it did last year. Also, they saved $8.9 million against the cap. And in an era of football where we have rollover cap, which to I guess explain it, it's exactly what it sounds like. You remember when Singular, the phone company, let you roll over your minutes into the next month? If you're as old as me, you might remember that. That's what teams get to do with their salary cap. And then I think over like a 3-year stretch, they're expected to spend 99% of the cap across 3 years or something like that. So it's not like you can just keep rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and at some point have, a $500 million payroll one season. I don't think that's possible. And even if it was, I think it would certainly be anti-competitive, and it would be not in the spirit of the spending expectations in the collective bargaining agreement. But the Seahawks, Noah Fant might not see the field if he's on that roster. He might be the third string tight end. And if he's the third string tight end and you can save $9 million by releasing him, it's a no-brainer. There was some expectation that he might garner something in trade, and fine. If you could have gotten a 7th-round pick for him, take it. Obviously, they couldn't. Not with that salary. Why would a team... And the promise is still there. He's still a very athletic tight end. Why would a team trade for a guy who's just never put it together? A guy who's not a spring chicken. He's going to be 28 years old next year. A guy who, in Denver, he had seasons of 562, 673, and 670 yards. But in Seattle, last year was actually the first year that he crossed 500 yards. And it wasn't like a super impressive year. He hasn't been a guy who gets in the end zone a ton. It's all projection. And they gave up on the projection. When they draft Elijah Arroyo, that's the new guy they're banking on the projection. A guy who was incredibly talented, was injured in college a lot. You can't have that many guys who are just based on projection. So, especially not making $12 million a year or, costing you $9 million extra dollars against the cap. So this was a no-brainer to me. This is the thing I've talked about since the Seahawks offseason started. People are acting like it's a shock. I think it's because if it's a shock to you, it's because you don't understand how NFL front offices work. And I don't mean that as condescending or snide. It's just the reality is this was written on the wall. When you draft a tight end that high and this guy costs a bunch of money and doesn't produce much, it's not a hard equation to go. That being said, I would be thrilled if the Seahawks brought Noah Fant back on a $2 million deal. I still like him as a player. I do, despite him being about to turn 28, or he's going to turn 28 during the season, I do think there's untapped potential. But he also signed, by the way, do you remember that? It was that Colby Parkinson signed for like a crazy amount of money and Will Dissly signed for a crazy amount of money, and you're like, fuck. Both those guys really, I think both those guys were actually better fits. And then they signed Noah Fant to that deal. It was kind of a bargain because he's the most athletic and younger than Dissly, I believe, or at least has played less games and been less injured than Dissly has. And Parkinson was like, he was like the third string guy in Seattle. You're gonna pay that guy as much money as he made? What was Parkinson's deal? I want to say it was like 3 years, $24 million. 3 years, $22.5 million. I wouldn't have wanted the Seahawks to sign him to that deal. So yeah, I think that the amount of times on this podcast I've probably said Mariners when I meant Seahawks and vice versa is appalling. Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted the Seahawks to sign Colby Parkinson to that deal. What was Will Dissly's deal was also... Will Dissly's deal was 3 years, $14 million, $4.5 million signing bonus, $10 million guaranteed. What does that mean? 2 years of guaranteed... Yeah, 2 years of guaranteed salary. So, damn, does he have... He actually has significant guarantees into next year, too. I think $3 million of his salary is guaranteed next year. I don't want that deal for the Seahawks either. So, certainly would have preferred Noah Fant to either of those guys. But they moved on. They moved on to cheaper options and arguably better options. Guys that have the opportunity to be very productive. Can the Seahawks afford to cut guys that are good? Is Noah Fant good? I saw a tweet like that. Can the Seahawks afford to cut a guy that's good? He hasn't been good. He hasn't played well. He's also not like reputedly a great blocker, or the things you might hope for from a guy who wasn't super productive catching the ball. Anyway, please, by the way, come see me do stand-up comedy. I'm in on Saturday. I'm at a bar in Bremerton, whose name I have forgotten. If you Google Casey McLean Bremerton, I'm sure you'll get there. Let's see. Do we get there? Yes. It is at the... What is this bar called? The 884 Pub. It is the Three Good Men comedy show, which feels like you're not allowed to do in 2025, but it's me, Neil Singh, very funny comic, and Mason A opening for me. Gonna be a fun time. Tickets are still on sale. Only $5, by the way, pre-sale tickets to that. So if you live in that area, come on out. July 30th, I will be at the Emerald City Comedy Club doing the My Straight Friend show, which is a pretty cool show. Joe Dombrowski and Richie Armani, two gay dudes talking to straight comics, which is a funny concept, and all the clips are great. August 17th, I'm doing a yet-to-be-named show at Tacoma Comedy Club. Just keep an eye on Tacoma Comedy Club's website. August 21st and 23rd, maybe 22nd. Not sure yet. I will be doing shows in the Spokane area. 21st, I'll be at Spokane Comedy Club. 23rd, I will be opening for Bert Kreischer at the Spokane 1 Soccer Arena. It'll be hopefully the largest crowd I've ever performed for. Last year, I opened for Tom Segura there. It was the largest crowd I'd performed for last year, and I think it'll be bigger this year because the weather will probably be better. And then August 31st, probably the coolest thing left on my calendar this summer is I get to open for my buddy Gabriel Rutledge while he records. Boy, it's his maybe fifth special, at least fourth special, depending on how you count crowd work specials. He's got a lot of specials that have come out, and he's recording a new one. Great material. I've watched it a bunch of times since his last special got recorded. The new hour is tremendous. Come out to that. And it's Labor Day weekend, so there's a good chance that there'll be some free tickets available. So come on out. Hit me up if you want to go and you see it's not sold out on the website. Hit me up and I might be able to get you in for free. Gotta have a great crowd for that because we gotta get Gabe a good special. Otherwise, thank you for listening. The few of you that have made it through this far, thank you for doing it, and I love you. And I'll see you next week, maybe this week at some point. We'll see.